The argument in the maternity ward had already spiraled far beyond anything the exhausted young mother could handle. She stood clutching her newborn as though the tiny bundle in her arms were the only anchor keeping her from collapsing. Her mother-in-law, red-faced and trembling with indignation, practically pushed the nurses aside as she berated the girl for every imagined wrongdoing. She insisted she had warned her son that this girl would ruin his life, that she wasn't worthy of their family, that the baby would be better off raised by responsible adults. Every word struck like a slap, and the new mother could only stand there, pale and shaking, wishing someone, anyone, would step in before she broke down completely. The nurses exchanged worried glances but hesitated, aware that personal family matters often erupted in this ward and that stepping into the middle of this storm could escalate things further. The young mother tried to defend herself, her voice quivering as she whispered that she had done nothing wrong, that she loved her husband and their child, that she only wanted peace. But the older woman cut her off with a harsh laugh, accusing her of lying, manipulating, and trapping her son. The corridor felt suffocating, as if the walls were inching closer with every raised word. Then, just when it seemed the mother-in-law would explode into an even more vicious tirade, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. A moment later, the hallway fell eerily quiet. Out stepped a tall, stern-faced man the young mother recognized instantly, her father-in-law, the one man the older woman never expected to see today. He had been distant for months, avoiding family gatherings, rarely calling, and certainly not involving himself in conflicts. His presence alone cut through the noise like a blade. He took in the scene with one sweeping, razor-sharp glance: the trembling new mother, the crying newborn, the furious grandmother, the horrified staff. His jaw tightened. Without a word, he moved to stand beside the young woman, placing one protective hand on her shoulder, a gesture that made her knees nearly buckle with relief. The mother-in-law's mouth opened and closed like she had been struck mute. She stammered, trying to reclaim her authority, but he lifted a hand, silencing her effortlessly. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried no anger, only disappointment so profound it echoed louder than any shouting could have. He told her she had crossed a line that could never again be blurred. He reminded her that this girl had just given birth, that she was part of their family whether she liked it or not, and that no one, least of all someone claiming to act out of love, had the right to bully a new mother on the most vulnerable day of her life. He exposed her bitterness, her controlling behavior, and her refusal to let go of resentment that had already cost her too many relationships. Each sentence seemed to peel away the pride she hid behind. For the first time, she couldn't shield herself from the truth. The young mother watched in stunned silence as he defended her with a calm firmness she had never witnessed before. The entire corridor seemed to breathe again. Even the nurses, who had been frozen in place, relaxed their shoulders. The mother-in-law's face drained of color. She had expected to win this battle effortlessly, to drive the girl out with sheer force of will. Instead, she found herself standing alone, exposed, and powerless in front of the one person whose opinion she still valued. In that moment, everything changed. The power dynamic shifted completely. The new mother wasn't alone anymore, she had someone fighting for her, someone who saw her worth without judgment. And the mother-in-law, so loud moments earlier, now stood defeated, stunned into silence by the arrival of the one person she could not argue with, the unexpected guest who shattered her certainty and halted her cruelty with just a few undeniable truths. The reality of what happened that day did not fully sink in until hours later, when the young mother found herself seated in the quiet corner of her hospital room, her newborn gently sleeping against her chest. Her heartbeat was finally starting to settle, but the confrontation replayed in her mind with vivid clarity. What had begun as one of the happiest days of her life had nearly turned into a nightmare, one that might have crushed her spirit if not for the most unexpected intervention. Before the father-in-law arrived, she had truly believed she was alone. Her husband was still stuck in traffic, her parents lived in another city, and she hadn't wanted to bother anyone with what she hoped would be a short visit from her mother-in-law. But, short, turned into a storm. The older woman had not even congratulated her on the baby's arrival. Instead, she marched in with accusations that hit straight at the girl's deepest insecurities. She claimed the young mother was too immature to raise a child, that she had probably exaggerated her pains during labor for sympathy, and that the baby looked more like her side of the family, spoken as though it were a crime. The young mother remembered standing there frozen, unable to shield herself or her newborn with anything other than trembling words. She had tried to reason, tried to remind her mother-in-law that they were family now, that she wanted nothing but unity and peace. But every sentence she attempted was drowned out by the older woman's relentless attacks. She felt smaller with every passing second, like she was shrinking beneath the weight of insults that had no basis in truth but cut deeply because of who they came from. At the height of the chaos, when she had nearly given up hope, the sound of the elevator had seemed insignificant. But everything changed the moment the doors opened. The father-in-law didn't rush or shout. He simply walked forward with a calmness that radiated authority. Even before he spoke, the energy in the hallway shifted. It was as if a higher court had arrived. When he stood at the young mother's side, she felt, for the first time in hours, that someone saw her, really saw her, and understood the injustice unfolding. His words, firm yet controlled, struck deeper than any confrontation she had ever witnessed. He spoke not only to defend her but to expose the pattern of cruelty his former wife had inflicted not just today, but for years. He reminded her that this girl had done nothing but love their son, that she had welcomed their family despite the coldness shown to her, and that she had carried and delivered their grandchild with strength that deserved admiration, not ridicule. He pointed out how wrong it was to accuse a woman who had just endured childbirth, one of life's greatest physical and emotional trials, of weakness or manipulation. But what shocked the young mother most was his vulnerability. He admitted, right there in that hallway, that he regretted staying silent for so long. He said he wished he had spoken up earlier, before bitterness had taken root so deeply in his ex-wife's heart. His honesty left the mother-in-law stunned. Her attempt to bark back failed miserably, her voice cracked, her excuses stumbled, and her usual confidence evaporated. She had no shield left, no justification that could stand against the truth spoken so clearly. After the confrontation, the father-in-law stayed with the young mother until her husband arrived. He sat quietly beside her, occasionally asking if she needed water, or if the baby was feeling okay. He didn't bring up the argument again, as though he wanted to give her space to breathe, to recover, to feel safe again. The nurses who had witnessed everything checked on her with extra gentleness, offering smiles and soft reassurances. Later, her husband rushed in, breathless and horrified when he learned what had happened. But instead of finding his wife shattered, he found her supported, physically, emotionally, and unexpectedly, by his father, who shared the entire story without embellishment or anger, only clarity. As the evening settled and quiet returned, the young mother realized something profound. Families aren't defined by blood alone, but by who stands beside you when you're most vulnerable. And on that day, when she thought she had no one, an unexpected guest stepped in, not to rescue her, but to show her she deserved far better than the cruelty she had endured. What lingered long after the conflict was not the shouting, nor the tension, nor even the humiliation that had temporarily paralyzed the mother-in-law. What remained was the quiet after, the strange stillness that filled the maternity corridor as everyone tried to process what had just happened. The young mother sat on the edge of her hospital bed, cradling her newborn, her arms still trembling. She had survived childbirth, but the emotional blow she had suffered afterward had nearly been harder to bear. Yet now, wrapped in the silence that followed the storm, she felt something she had not expected to feel that day: relief. A fragile, tentative relief, but relief nonetheless. The father-in-law's presence continued to resonate even after he left the hallway. His firm words had reset the balance of power in a way the young mother had never believed possible. For months, she had endured the mother-in-law's cold comments, her constant criticism, and her attempts to dictate every detail of her life. During her pregnancy, the older woman had dismissed her cravings, mocked her fears, and accused her of exaggerating her morning sickness. But the young woman had always stayed quiet, believing that perhaps she was overreacting, that maybe enduring this treatment was part of entering a new family. Now she realized she had simply been too afraid to be seen as problematic. But that fear evaporated when her husband arrived. He came rushing in, breathless, hair disheveled, eyes wide with concern. He looked first at his wife, then at his sleeping baby, then finally at his father, who gave him a short, meaningful nod. There was no need for words. The husband instantly understood that something serious had unfolded. When his father retold the events, not with theatrics but with clarity and sincerity, the husband's face darkened. He turned to his wife, apologized for not being there sooner, and held her hand with a tenderness that eased the tension she had been carrying for hours. Meanwhile, the mother-in-law hovered outside the room, too humiliated to enter but too stubborn to leave. She paced back and forth, occasionally peeking inside, but each time she met her ex-husband's disapproving stare, she recoiled. She wasn't ready to admit she had crossed a line, but she could no longer pretend she was right. The truth had been laid bare, and everyone, not just family, but strangers, nurses, and staff, had witnessed it. Her pride, which had always been her shield, now felt like a weight she could no longer carry. Inside the room, the atmosphere softened. The father-in-law spoke gently to his son and daughter-in-law, telling them that this moment, bringing a new life into the world, deserved celebration, not conflict. He even held the baby for a few minutes, his rough hands surprisingly steady and tender. The young mother watched him with gratitude, realizing that his act of stepping in had changed everything. He had given her not just protection but validation. Her emotions, her fears, her dignity, they mattered. As the nurses came in to perform routine checks, they treated the young mother with an extra dose of kindness. One nurse even whispered that she was proud of how strong the girl had been, that not every new mother would have handled such pressure with such grace. Those words felt like balm. For the first time in a long time, the young mother believed someone saw her strength. Night came, and with it a much-needed stillness. The father-in-law finally left, giving them space to rest. The husband lay on the small couch, refusing to leave his wife's side, while she held their newborn close, watching the baby's tiny breaths rise and fall. Everything felt fragile yet profoundly peaceful. As she drifted into sleep, one thought repeated quietly in her mind: sometimes help comes from the most unexpected place. Sometimes the people you least expect become your defenders. And sometimes, when a storm tries to break you, life sends someone who stands in its path, not to fight for you, but to remind you that you are worth fighting for.